Good morning all. We'll briefly go into private session to deal with some housekeeping matters. Good morning all. Just first of all to note apologies for today's meeting has been received from Senator Imelda Goldsborough. The purpose of today's meeting is for the Joint Committee to discuss issues facing the taxi industry, and we do so with the Irish Taxi Drivers Federation, Timoni Tashki Naheran, the Tralee Taxi Association, the Taxis for Ireland Coalition, the National Private Hire and Taxi Association, and the Taxi Alliance of Ireland. Today, on behalf of the committee, I'm pleased to welcome, first of all, from the Irish Taxis Federation, Mr. Alan Cooley, who's the President. From Timoni Tashki Naheran, Mr. David McGuinness, who's the Chair, and Mr. Alan Brennan, who's the Secretary. From the Tralee Taxi Association, Mr. Terry Boyle, who's the Chair, and joined by Mr. Patrick Hurley. From the Taxis for Ireland Coalition, Mr. Pat Crotty, who's the CEO of the Vintners Federation of Ireland, and Mr. Adrian Cummins, the CEO of the Restaurant Association of Ireland. On behalf of the National Private Hire and Taxi Association, Mr. Jim Waldron, spokesperson, and from the Taxi Alliance of Ireland, Mr. Angus MacDonald, PRO. Before we begin, just some notes on privilege. Witnesses are reminded of the long-standing parliamentary practice that you should not criticise or make charges against any person or entity by name or in such a way as to make him, her or it identifiable or otherwise engage in speech that might be regarded as damaging to the good name of that person or entity. Therefore, if your statements are potentially defamatory in relation to an identifiable person or entity, you will be directed to discontinue your remarks. It's imperative that you comply with any such direction. Again, members then are reminded of the long-standing parliamentary practice to the effect that they should not comment on, criticise or make charges against a person or entity outside the Houses or an official either by name or in such a way as to make him or her identifiable. I would remind you or remind members of the constitutional requirement that you must be physically present within the confines of Leinster House complex in order to participate in public meetings. I will not permit a member to participate where they are not adhering to this constitutional requirement. Therefore, any member who attempts to participate from outside the precincts will be asked to leave the meeting. In this regard, I would ask members partaking via MS Teams that prior to making their contribution to the meeting that you confirm that you're on the grounds of the Leinster House campus. Just for our witnesses, normally it's 5 minutes for opening statements, but because we have 6 representative groups, we've restricted that to 3 minutes. Just to ask witnesses to do your best to adhere to that 3-minute schedule. Now, I'll first of all invite Mr. Cooley to make his opening statement on behalf of the Irish Taxi Drivers Federation.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to make this submission on behalf of the Irish Taxi Drivers Federation. We urgently need the taxi regulations to be updated and stop the fast-moving app companies destroying the taxi industry in Ireland. We know from other countries that Uber and other app companies that their business model is to dismantle the Irish taxi industry in every and each country, they gain entry to, paying lobbyists to engage with government, which they've done in their own country, trying to bring in their own business model, which is fixed fares, turning family cars that sit in your driveways into taxis when needed, thus turning a very successful regulated taxi industry in Ireland into a part-time industry which is not controlled by the NTA, but is controlled by an app-based company that is run from California and other European countries. We'd also like to acknowledge the important work which is undertaken and the service that is provided by taxi drivers in our communities. Taxis play an important role in providing access to essential services, including healthcare. As we are individual stakeholders in the taxi industry, we cannot go up against multinational app companies without the protection of the NTA. These tech companies who control the booking platforms in Ireland can change their terms and conditions whenever their boardrooms want higher profits. The 2013 taxi Regulation Act has no legislation to protect the Irish taxi industry because in 2013 the tech companies did not exist in Ireland. The public commentary surrounding the difficulty that drivers find themselves in having to deal with is not helped by the slanderous assertions of many. Taxi drivers are robbers, taxi fares are rip-offs, a bit of competition will do them no good. Time to take the cartel down. All very hurtful comments that are very untrue. Of course, these predatory dispatch platforms and their shareholders are only full aware of how to divide and conquer. Globally, these predators have ruined the lives of countless taxi drivers, and suicide and financial ruin go hand in their playbook. I thank you for your time, and feel free to ask me any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cooley. I'll now invite Mr. McGuinness to make his opening statements on behalf of Tamani Tashki Nahiran.
I would like to thank the chairperson and the members of the committee for the opportunity to speak here today. After a disturbing primetime special aired on the 12th of the 5th, 2012, Transport Minister Leo Varadkar requested a complete overhaul of taxi licensing and regulations in conjunction with the National Transport Authority, headed up by the then Minister of State, Alan Kelly. The key goals and achievements of this review were to restore customer confidence through transparency and safety, fair competition, and to stop illicit operators undercutting honest drivers. Modernisation and an NTA taxi app for driver verification and a regulatory framework which included a new Taxi Regulation Act to replace the outdated system to be led by the NTA. In essence, Minister Kelly's review was a comprehensive overhaul aiming to professionalise and regulate the sector, making it safer and more reliable for customers whilst aiming toward good operators through rigorous new standards and enforcement. But as in most industries, since the technology has moved on and changed the way we work or order services, these changes have had a huge impact on our industry and the way we operate. Gone are the local taxi companies, and in general, we are now left with several technology multinationals who control a very high percentage of taxi bookings through app technology and algorithms passing this cost to the drivers. While most taxi drivers embrace the new technology and to continue to provide a top-class service as legislated by the 2013-16 Taxi Regulation Acts. But now that these technology companies have gained a monopoly in the industry, they are pushing the legal boundaries of the legislation to control the fares and therefore push down drivers' incomes and increase fares for passengers through priority bookings and technology fees, which the driver does not receive. We would ask the Chairman and the members of the Transport Committee to recommend to the Minister to update the legislation to outlaw these practices and protect drivers' incomes and customers alike. In our opinion, based on evidence from other jurisdictions, this is only the beginning of the moves by these companies to force a totally unregulated taxi market into Ireland. Currently, the NTA conducts a fair review of taxi fares carried out by independent third party and followed by a public consultation every 2 years. This review uses a taxi cost index to assess change in the taxi operating costs and the market conditions. In addition to the taxi cost index, the NTA considers wider economic and market factors, i.e. inflation, fuel, energy supply prices and market conditions. On the outcome of the review, the new fare is implemented, giving the provider of the service the ability to sustain a reasonable income and the customer value for money. The interference by both FreeNow, Lyft and Uber with the metered fare has reduced the sustainable income provided to for the driver by the regulated fare structure, which will lead to a long-term withdrawal and a decline of operators from the taxi sector. The withdrawal of taxi drivers and a decline in the availability for customers will lead these companies offering to provide an unregulated, unsafe model, offering dynamic surge pricing dependent on the need to users. Over the last 10 years, successive Irish governments have invested approximately €80 million in the taxi industry through wheelchair accessible grants, electric wheelchair grants, electric vehicle grants and local area hackney grants. Equivalent investment has been made by the taxi drivers to provide an accessible and sustainable new taxi fleet. The government must protect this investment by the Irish taxpayer by legislating to protect the metered fare. The Irish government and the legislator now faces a choice on whether to allow the tech companies to destroy the regulated taxi sector and the livelihoods of 20,000 operators, or allow the above tech companies...
Just to ask you, Mr. if you can just bring to a conclusion, you just gone 2 minutes over time at this stage.
Oh, okay, sorry. Another 2 sentences. Well, the operator barely makes minimum wage. Once again, we ask the committee to recommend to the Minister for Transport and the National Transport Authority to ensure standards set in the fare review are upheld to allow a professional taxi service to the public. For the public and for taxi drivers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and apologies for speeding up. I'll now invite Mr. Boyle to make his opening statement on behalf of the Tralee Taxi Association.
Thank you, Chairman. Chair, committee members, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. My purpose this morning is not to restate every detail of our written submission, but to outline its core findings and concerns, particularly as they affect rural Ireland, public safety and the sustainability of the taxi industry. Ireland's taxi service is public interest transport infrastructure. In rural areas especially, taxis are not discretionary. They provide access to work, healthcare, education and safe travel at times when no other transport exists. That reality must remain central to policy decisions. Since deregulation in 2001, the National Licensing and Maximum Fare Framework overseen by the National Transport Authority has broadly worked. However, subsequent regulatory changes, notably the 10-year rule, the 10-year vehicle age limit and ban on licence transfers, have created serious unintended consequences. The 10-year rule is especially damaging in rural areas where replacement costs are high and vehicles remain roadworthy longer. Likewise, the ban on licence transfers has driven the industry into unregulated long-term leasing arrangements, creating legal, financial and tax risks that are entirely avoidable through a controlled transfer system. Rural taxi services operate on structure, not algorithms. Phone bookings, regular customers and local rosters that guarantee early morning, late night and emergency cover. That structure is now being undermined. Multinational app platforms allow drivers to work only when it suits them, with no obligation to provide cover. The result is reduced rural availability, loss of unsocial hours services, and drivers leaving rural counties to work in cities. It is telling that platforms such as Uber and Bolt have themselves warned of shortages during peak periods, an admission that this model is not fit for rural Ireland. A central concern in our submission is fixed and algorithmic pricing. Fixed fare models break the link between the regulated taximeter and real journey conditions. Drivers carry all the risk of delays and congestions, while platforms control the fare and take commission. For a full-time driver earning around $26,000 take-home, this represents a significant and unsustainable income reduction. We also raise serious concerns around GDPR and data use. Driver and passenger data is increasingly reused for algorithmic pricing, ranking and access to work. With little transparency, this creates an unfair system where platforms understand pricing and allocation logic, but drivers and consumers do not. Accessibility is another critical issue. Wheelchair accessible vehicles are essential public service asset, yet they are more expensive to operate and disadvantaged by algorithm-driven dispatch systems. The current wheelchair accessible vehicle grant scheme is over-subsidised and does not meet the demand. On workforce supply, we strongly support robust Garda vetting to protect public safety. However, The current PSV licensing and vetting process is slow and fragmented. Streamlining this process without weakening standards is essential to bring new drivers into the industry. Finally, many rural drivers support the development of a national taxi booking app operated by the NTA, building on the existing TFI pilot. This would restore public oversight, ensure fair transparency, protect data, support accessibility, and integrate taxis properly with the wider public transport system. In summary, our submission asks the committee to consider targeted practical reforms, reviewing fixed fare models, reforming licence governance, supporting rural services, strengthening accessibility, ensuring data transparency, streamlining vetting, and exploring an NTA-run booking platform. Ireland's taxi industry can remain sustainable, accessible and safe, but only if regulation keeps pace with technology. Thank you, Chair and members, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Boyle. I now invite Mr. Crotty to make his opening statement on behalf of the Taxi for Ireland coalition.
Thank you, Chairman, and members of the committee for the opportunity to speak to you today. I'm the Chief Executive of the Vintners Federation of Ireland, which represents publicans across Ireland outside of Dublin. I'm appearing today on behalf of the Taxis of Ireland coalition, along with Adrian Cummins of the Restaurant Association. The coalition was formed in late 2023 and brings together organisations that depend on a functioning taxi system. The VFI, the Restaurant Association of Ireland, the Licensed Vintners Association, the Irish Tourism Industry Confederation, Vision Ireland, as well as Uber and Bolt. We are a broad-based coalition because the problem we are addressing cuts across all sectors, regions and communities. The starting point for today's discussion must be the data, because the scale of the problem is clear from the data. Since 2019, Ireland's population has grown by 8.5%. Over the same period, the total number of small public service vehicles has grown by just 1% nationally. 23 of Ireland's 26 counties have seen a decline in taxi numbers since 2019. More than 10% of the regional SP-SV fleet has disappeared. The border region is down by nearly 20%, and Leinster, outside of Dublin, has declined by just short of 15%. This decline is part of a long-term trend. The number of SP-SV driver licences fell from 47,529 in May 2009 to 34,678 in 2012 and stood at 27,887 in 2025, a decline of 20% since 2012 and over 40% of a decrease since 2009. For rural Ireland, this has significant consequences. In many towns and villages, taxis are no longer available at night. This affects the footfall and viability of businesses that operate in the nighttime economy and has an impact on all sorts of community life. Customers leave earlier or don't come out at all because they don't have a way to get home safely. Surveys cited by the coalition show that 7 in 10 people find it difficult to get home from pubs and restaurants in their area, and nearly 4 in 10 people are concerned about getting home safely due to taxi shortages. This is also a public safety issue. Publicans have spent decades promoting responsible drinking and supporting drink driving enforcement, but when taxis are unavailable, people are left without a safe alternative. A functioning taxi system is a critical part of Ireland's road safety framework, particularly outside cities where public transport options are limited or non-existent. The coalition does not believe this is a failure of demand. Demand exists. We have a problem of supply, a problem driven by the absence of a national strategy, rising barriers to entry, and no targets for supply or regional coverage. This is why we are calling for a national taxi strategy with clear evidence-based targets for driver and vehicle numbers, a focus on rural availability and peak time accessibility, and policies that lower unnecessary barriers for new entrants. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Crotty. I'll now ask Mr. Waldron to make his opening statement on behalf of the National Private Hire and Taxi Association.
Thank you, Chairman. Our members provide a safe, professional door-to-door transport service across the country. The sector consists of approximately 27 licensed drivers operating 20,000 vehicles, 25% of which are wheelchair accessible. And our service plays the vital role in plugging the gaps from all other forms of transport that let us down. Over many years, our members have actively embraced professionalism and innovation. All vehicles accept both cash and credit card payments. Drivers welcome the introduction of app-based booking technology, albeit with caution. However, drivers felt reassured that Ireland's strong regulatory framework and oversight role of the National Transport Authority would reassure them. Drivers who use apps found they could work more efficiently, and the commission paid to these companies was generally offset by the improved access to work. That balance changed in November when Uber introduced a fixed fares policy, and more recently, Free Now upped their commission to 25%. This marks a fundamental shift in control. App companies are no longer acting merely as booking platforms. They are now effectively setting fares, controlling work allocation and influencing drivers' income. They undermine the regulated taximeter, a system established by the NTA following extensive public consultation designed to balance affordability for passengers with a financially sustainable career for the driver. The taximeter is not outdated, it's fair, it's transparent and trusted. Removing or bypassing it risks destabilising a system that works for public interest. App companies operate on a commission-based models that lack transparency and allow fees to be increased unilaterally. Drivers bear all the operating costs and risks, while algorithms increasingly reward longer hours and penalise job refusal. This creates a downward pressure on earnings and threatens the long-term viability of the profession. Crucially, this is not just about a driver issue, it's a passenger issue. App companies have no obligation to ensure rural coverage. Their algorithms prioritise profit, not public need. Ireland's SPSV model is respected internationally precisely because it's regulated, inclusive, safe and reliable. Allowing app companies to override that framework risks replacing public interest system with a profit-driven one. This raises a fundamental question for the Minister. Will they allow app companies will they be allowed to continue to position themselves between licensed drivers and the National Transport Authority, acting as unregulated brokers and charging significant fees to both passengers and drivers? What we now seek from the Public Transport Committee are clear assurances that driver livelihoods will be protected and the NTA will retain full authority over fares, standards and market oversight. We ask the NTA be explicitly empowered to regulate app-based platforms, including prevent the use of algorithms that maximise profits at the expense of drivers and service quality. If such control cannot be effectively exercised, we propose that the NTA develop a publicly regulated booking platform. This would allow passengers to view and request nearby licensed taxis directly, ensure fair and regulated fares, protect accessibility and provide the NTA with accurate, independent data rather than relying on commercially based information. The choice before you is simple: a regulated public interest taxi service or a market controlled by profit-driven algorithms. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Waldron. And finally now I'd like to invite Mr MacDonald to make his opening statement on behalf of the Taxi Alliance of Ireland.
The national maximum taxi fare is the statutory mechanism for calculating the fare structure to which all taxi drivers must adhere. The ethos of the fare review is twofold: to offer reasonable cost to the passenger and to ensure a fair return to the driver for his or her labour. Today we're experiencing a perfect storm within the industry. Taxi drivers in Ireland have fully embraced technology and indeed have become extremely reliant on electronic and app-based dispatch platforms to earn their livings. Within the Taxi Regulation Act, there is one solitary page outlining the licensing requirements for dispatch operators. That's Statutory Instrument 472 of 2009. These requirements consist of no more than a few administrative compliances, and hey presto, these companies are free to make out like bandits at the expense of the taxi driver currently and the passengers going forward. We believe the award of a dispatch licence should be a privilege and not a right. Back in 2009, when SI 472 of 2009 was enacted, taxi dispatch operators were mainly using two-way radio and in-car data systems to dispatch bookings. Now booking apps are the norm. The Taxi Cost Index, which establishes the costs experienced by the average taxi driver, makes note of and allows for the cost of dispatch company affiliation, rental cost, and currently the average percentage charge experienced by drivers affiliated to app-based dispatch operators. CSO figures estimate these costs within the Taxi Cost Index are €2,997 per driver per annum. It therefore follows that any additional costs incurred by drivers must be taken into account in the next biennial fare review. Therefore, increased costs for drivers will result in increased fares for passengers, as per the statutory obligations of the Taxi Cost Index to establish the fare structure based on and reflective of all costs borne by the taxi driver. We appeal to the committee, the Minister and his department and the NTA to immediately make legislative changes to the Taxi Regulation Act to outlaw third-party interference with the national maximum taxi fare in an effort to circumvent it and the powers of the NTA. Drivers' fares are capped by legislation. Why not dispatch operator fees? The narrative that we've heard of just delete the app doesn't fly, as drivers have little or no option but to affiliate to one or all of them, such as the monumental struggle to earn a living from the taxi business currently. The current injustices being experienced by taxi drivers at the hands of these predatory dispatch operators must be stopped before the Irish taxi industry is decimated in this race to the bottom. Make no mistake, the consumer will ultimately pay the price soon after the professional taxi driver is no more. Ms. Lemass.
Thank you, Mr. MacDonald, and that includes our opening statements from witnesses. Just at the outset, I just want to acknowledge that today's hearing follows on from a series of hearings that were held in the AV room, I think in early December, which I attended myself, and at that hearing I gave a commitment that we would have a hearing in a timely manner. Hence we are here today on the 21st of January. I just want to acknowledge that I couldn't accommodate all witness requests today, in particular one witness request, but the committee are working in terms of facilitating that witness perhaps next week. I just want to acknowledge the trusted service provided by taxi owners, taxi drivers across the country in terms of the help assistance provided to people, particularly vulnerable people, elderly people, people with a disability, in terms of, helping them to stay connected within their communities, more often than not, helping them to get to work, get to a shop, get to church. I think it's really important. But the reality, unfortunately, is that, taxi drivers, the amount of vehicles active in Ireland is in serious decline, and I know Mr. Crotty referred to that, and just in terms of data made available to me, when I started out in public life in 2009, there was 47,529 driver licences, significant decline into 2012, and the latest figure available to me is something around 27,000, and between 2012 and 2025 that's a 20% decrease in licensed drivers just in 20 years. Even in my own native Tipperary, this serious decline, I see it firsthand myself in my hometown of Clonmel. So I just want to acknowledge as well, in terms of the message received in the opening statements and what I've heard today, is the strength and consistency of those concerns raised by all the associations, and those concerns centring around fare integrity, driver income, sustainability, and the growing power of multinational booking platforms. Just to acknowledge representatives of the hospitality sector as well, and not that we needed it, but compelling evidence of a serious shortage of taxis, particularly outside Dublin during evening and weekends, with knock-on effects for rural social life, tourism, employment and community viability. So our task as a committee is to understand where enforcement, regulation, data policy design are falling short, and what practical precision type reforms are required. So with that in mind, I'll begin with questions to our witnesses. We have a rota. clock is not working. We've an hour and 15 minutes. We'll have only one opportunity for each member, and I'm anxious to facilitate Deputy Boyd Barrett, who has been in attendance for the entire meeting, approximately 7 minutes per member. We have a rota, and first up is, and if you could, because we have so many witnesses, if each member could direct their questions to a specific witness. 7 minutes, first of all, Deputy Michael Collins, followed by Deputy Emer Crowe.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Chairman, and I appreciate you facilitating the other group that wanted to be in here. We'll hopefully do that very, very soon. And look, it's hard to direct a question at any one of you. Look, you're all welcome in here because you're all, in fairness, fighting the same cause, which is, you know, protection of the people. But I might ask you, Mr. Cooley, so you were the first person to ask the question. Could you answer me the question, how regulated is Uber in comparison to taxi operators?
Well, Uber is basically just a booking platform. They're not actually a taxi driver. They're a dispatch operation. So, as in, they use the taxi drivers in the country for, they're not just free now, Uber, you know, Taxi 2000, the links, they're all really the same. They're basically just a booking platform.
And have they any regulation? Like, I mean,
no.
The drivers, do they have to go through the same rigorous?
No, so the investment would be, no, the driver would invest in a car, he would invest in the licence, he would invest in the SGS, he would invest in installing his meter, the driver would invest in getting his meter calibrated, his driver would invest in insurance, tax. So it's a very minimal investment from a booking agent to get a world-class service. Like you've seen the investment coming in from the government. Dave just said 80 million in the last couple of years. The investment is ongoing from the drivers and the NTA. It's a very minimal investment from the booking agent, basically just setting up a platform, advertising it, and people booking a taxi on it. And that's really all their investment is. They've no investment in any vehicle in the country.
What I can't understand is that, you know, taxis are regulated within an inch of their life. From the very moment they get they have to go and get their licence or whatever. Yes. And some of the most ridiculous questions put before drivers, maybe in rural areas, ask about stuff up the country that has no relevance. And why and how in the name of God have we left ourselves in a situation where Uber can just walk in unregulated and run basically your service? Yeah,
well, I can probably answer that to the best of my ability. In 2013, there was no tech companies in the country. When Mr. Alan Kelly re-regulated the market at the time, and that's probably addressing why at the time there was, 45,000 licences in the country. If you go back to 2009, the renewal fee for your licence was €3. So a lot of people had taxi PSV license sitting in their wardrobes who never used them. So, you know, after deregulation in 99, or sorry, 2000, November 2000, there was a 500% increase in taxi licenses over the next 8 years, which led to an oversupply. And, you know, and that became, double jobbing was prevalent. There was people like the vulnerabilities oversight, particularly in the urban cities. Throughout the 2000s, there was a saturation. So when Minister Kelly came in, he put up the renewal to €250, which got rid of a lot of drivers, a lot of PSV holders. It wasn't worth it to keep it. They brought in the 9-year rule in testing. They brought in tax clearance certs, which was a major reason why people didn't renew their PSV licences at the time, especially in rural Ireland, which seems to be the big problem here at the moment. But I just want to try give you an insight to what's happening. Don't forget, you're going through the biggest crisis the country ever witnessed in 07, 08, 09, 2010, 11 and 12 and 13, and then the country started to get back on its feet. So at that stage, the whole taxi industry was overhauled. As I said, the higher standards of vehicles, the SGS was brought in, was cost money. You also had branding, you had the driver's link. So there was a lot more work that had to be done to become a taxi driver and to hold the PSV licence. So to answer the question, first of all, the work wasn't there in 2008, 9 and 10 and 11. That's why, first of all, you had a decline in licence numbers. And second of all, then, you know, we had the biggest crisis that the country ever witnessed. So, and getting back to, you know, the charges, the first thing they charged was a technology charge, which is totally illegal. If I was to put an extra euro, if you get into my car on a taxi rank and I put a euro extra onto my meter, you know, I'd be pulled up by the regulators straight away for overcharging. But it seems to be there's no legislation at the moment to protect the drivers and the passengers in this country from the price gouging from the tech companies. So, you know, it's very simple to say, like, you know, down the road for us, the Trojan horse at the moment is the fixed fare. Fixed fare comes in, cheaper fares, the passenger is happy. But directly down the line, Uber, Free Now, are directly challenging the authority of the NTA in this country. And they basically want to be sitting in 5 years' time, making the regulation up and making the legislation up themselves.
Is there an individualized Uber vehicle regulation?
No, there's no. There's only dispatch license.
It's extraordinary, to be honest with you.
So that's why we're in here today, because
you know, rule and regulation.
We are look,
right through the taxi.
In Europe, we're the most highly regulated taxi industry. We are the last. And the eyes of the taxi industry in Europe is watching this, because we've seen in every other country that Uber have entered. They have synthetically destroyed the taxi industry, and, you know, as I say, with heavy lobbying, and with they've a bank book that's, you know, billions on their side.
And just one other question, because my time is short, to Mr. Boyle there. You said supporting rural services, and I know the Vintners and Adrian are all here today. Like they're you know, a lot of pubs and restaurants and hotels around the countryside are finding it difficult to get taxi services. How do you think, Mr. Boyle, that could be turned around?
Deputy, with rural Ireland, as you will understand yourself, the notion that one size fits all doesn't really apply. Like you have, I think what has happened, particularly since the app companies have taken control, is there's a movement of drivers from the rural areas into the larger urban areas, where they come in at peak times, maybe where there's closing time, if there's events on and so on. I suppose what is happening, as you'll be aware as well, in rural Ireland, is we have a significant loss of pubs. You know, there's a huge reduction in the number of pubs. We have an added issue in some of the rural towns as well, where hotels that would have operated for tourism are no longer in the system for tourism, which has reduced the demand. And I think what has happened as well is traditionally rural Ireland taxi companies would have operated on a structured system, where you would have a number of vehicles that would be rostered to cover early morning, late night, and which it would be run locally, where you would be aware of what was happening, what was coming up, when the likely surges were. The app companies have removed that completely now. A driver can switch on his app whenever it suits. They come and go. The actual structure is disappearing from the industry in rural Ireland.
Thank you, Mr. Boyle. Thank you. Deputy Corey.
Thank you all very welcome here today. Firstly, just to say that many as a family in my constituency in Dublin West have been reared on the livelihood of a taxi driver, and we want to keep it that way. And thank you for getting me home late at night for many a year. I certainly see from your perspective the disruption with the taxi meter process being challenged by fixed fares, and it feels like a promotion that has been introduced over your heads that you have no control over, and that promotion is a permanent promotion that's being offered in relation to the perception of cheaper fares and fixed fares. And you know, talking to people over the last couple of weeks in anticipation of this meeting, certainly the Uber proposition is attractive because of the security of that fixed fare. I didn't have Uber up until a couple of days ago and checked it out myself and looked at the price of going to the airport. But you're saying there it's a false economy for consumers. Can you just touch on that? That you're saying that the perception that people have through this promotion that seems to be a permanent promotion around fixed fares and cheaper fares, that isn't accurate. I think you touched on it.
It's accurate at the beginning of the journey. And what Uber do is destroy the regulated industry, and then they introduce surge pricing. And surge pricing then depends on demand at certain times of the day, where the journey's gone, many customers are looking for a taxi at that time. So while the initial offering from Uber says that the only fixed price is the driver's getting a fixed price to carry you from A to B. But what we've seen already happening is that fixed price is what the driver gets. It's not what they take from you.
Okay.
So as we've sent in a number of instances where the fixed price that the driver receives is just say €25, but a passenger is actually charged 33, 34, 37 euro.
Okay.
So the fixed price is only for the driver. It's not what you're going to pay, because you will pay a priority booking fee, a technology fee, and that's added onto your fixed price. So they're only guaranteeing you, the driver, the fixed price. They're not guaranteeing you it, because they add on charges. And as I said, well, initially this is great, but as soon as the regulated taxi industry is destroyed, well, then the customers are at Uber's beck and call. And there is no governing like the NTA and the maximum fare structure to cover the price of the taxi.
Okay. So how do you get the public on board with this, do you think?
Well, look, it's like everybody. Like if I offer the public free taxi rides, they say that's the best thing in the world. You know that way.
Yeah.
But we have to sustain. The taxi drivers have to sustain a living, and the national taxi fare takes that into account. When every 2 years, when this is calculated, it allows me and the 20,000 other drivers in the country to sustain a living from driving the taxi. So, by the customers participating in this fixed fare, they're going to destroy that taxi industry. They're going to destroy the guarantee that there will be people working at 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning, 8 o'clock in the evening. It will become a part-time job. And the only time you will get a taxi will be when mum and dad's car is out working at weekends or when the car is available.
Okay. Anybody else want to come in on that?
Yeah, I just like to say, I think it's a form of grooming, excuse the expression, but what they're doing is they're getting the public used to something, you know, something that's not necessarily good for them, and then they'll take it away and they'll introduce a surge price. And we're looking for support from the House here to stop that, to stop the tech companies getting control of an industry. And we don't want to be back here in 2 years' time saying we told you so. But if we allow Uber and Free Now or other tech companies get the hold of the industry and manipulate it the way they're manipulating it and getting people used to a fixed fare, and then all of a sudden the fixed fare is double, you know, and then somebody can't afford to go on a taxi at all. That's what this is about. Our taxi service is a public interest. It's a public service. It's affordable for the public. And just because Free Now or Uber happen to make it a bit cheaper at the moment, it's a lost leader. They're trying to get control of the industry. That's what they're trying to do, and that's what they have done.
Okay, and how do you use this moment, I suppose, to address other issues within the sector, other issues that have been articulated today?
Well, just on what Pat has talked about, the national taxi strategy, there should be a strategy for the taxi industry, because we only ever deal with it every time it hits a crisis. Like, we have oversupply in Dublin at the moment. It's getting harder and harder to earn a reasonable income, because I think every new licence comes into the city. So a discussion with the likes of Pat and the organisations that represent rural Ireland and the industry, the tourism industries, is essential to provide decent taxi service. But as I said, it's only when crisis after crisis after crisis. I can tell you the last time we were in here, there was a different crisis going on in the taxi industry, where the National Transport Authority, they have a taxi advisory committee that doesn't seem to make any decisions. Like, they should have been dealing with this Uber free now lift the issue long before the taxi drivers had to go out onto the street before the Christmas. The same way they should be dealing with the lack of rural taxis a long time before it became a huge issue for their businesses and organisations.
Yeah.
So a national taxi strategy, I think the majority of us would totally agree with, once there's input from the taxi industry themselves, and it's not somebody else making the decisions on their behalf.
And I just want to bring Angus in, and Angus, yeah, I think the last speaker got a wee bit extra.
30 seconds to a minute.
You referred to the CSO figures. Just explain, if you can, what that 3,000 is. And also, I was interested in what you said about dispatch licensing, that you're saying that should be pulled out and made a bigger factor in all of this.
Yes,
and that's the same with Alan behind you.
The dispatch company's licensing requirements at the moment. This is them. This is one page out of a 73-page document, which is the Taxi Regulation Act. And to be quite honest with you, I think, as I say, it's of its time, but the compliances are produce a tax clearance certificate, develop a skills development programme. They pay a licence fee of €250 for the dispatch operator's licence. And therefore, and after that, an annual fee of £125. If it expires, it's a restoration fee of €250, which I find bizarre because if a taxi licence expires, it's a €500 charge. So basically, these are what I would deem administrative box-ticking compliance issues for the award of a licence. Okay. And I just don't think it's robust enough to cover the shenanigans as regards interference with the
Well, hopefully you'll just get a chance to tell somebody, people, what you want the Minister and what you want the NTA to do.
Deputy Daly.
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to thank you all for coming here today, especially the taxi drivers who have come up from Kerry. And I'll have a question for you in a few minutes, but just maybe a question for Mr. McGuinness and Mr. McDonald. You mentioned when you were concluding about the Taxi Advisory Committee and the way that it operates. What kind of changes would you like to see in a review or in the way that it operates, or what powers would you like it to have? Would you like to see it outlawing certain practices, limiting commission, for example, prohibiting tech fees, that kind of, what changes would you like to see?
Really, but I sat on the Taxi Advisory Committee for 5 years, and what I felt after leaving every meeting was it was reactionary. It was never forward planning for the industry. It was never, like, everybody knew that this Uber and Free Now, and they were going to attack the regulated industry here. The only people that didn't seem to realise this was coming was the Taxi Advisory Committee. So they should have been ahead of the game here if they want to protect my livelihood and the livelihoods of other taxi drivers. I would like to see them introduce a minimum commission charge, because you turn on the app any morning, you don't actually know what you're going to be charged on any given fare. You don't actually know what your income's going to be.
A minimum or a maximum commission fare?
There should be a maximum commission that they're allowed to charge on any fare, and that should be decided like the way my maximum fare is decided.
Yeah.
So overall, the Taxi Advisory Committee needs to be more proactive in the industry. It needs to involve more taxi drivers, taxi drivers' organisations in the discussion. There should be more input from the Department of Transport into the Taxi Advisory Committee. I think it's minimal at the moment. And a lot of the recommendations, they go to the NTA executive, where there's no direct connection between the department and that decision. So it's like another layer of bureaucracy between the Department of Transport, the NTA, and so, and I sat on it for 5 years, and I left it completely frustrated most days, because a lot of the people on it don't actually know too much about how the industry works. They don't know about the maximum fares. They don't know about the standards that we have to implement. They don't know about the costs that I have to
Okay, I'll just I'm short on time, so I'll just maybe ask Angus to continue on it with any views you might have on that, and maybe if you could explain the discounts that customers are getting, and is that a reduction from the amount that the drivers are getting, or the dispatch operator, or how does that work?
Thanks for the question. Just to follow on in relation to the Taxi Advisory Committee, I would suggest that going forward that the junior minister attends each meeting, so whatever's being discussed at a Taxi Advisory Committee meeting is communicated in its full facts back to the minister of the day. I would also suggest that there currently exists apparently a Class B fine levied, or the possibility of it being levied against people who discuss outside of committee anything that has been discussed within the committee. Now, if driver representatives are to be fully representative of drivers and to inform them of the goings-on, how can they do that if they're subject to a Class B fine of an amount up to €5,000, I believe, for discussing matters discussed within the Taxi Advisory Committee? In relation to discounts for passengers, I believe that the passengers don't get discounts. I believe that the situation is that the dispatch operators charge as much as they can to the drivers, which is deducted from the driver's fare. Now, this new practice of one company offering fixed fares is a bit of smoke and mirrors. I have an example here at the get-go of this whole fixed fare scenario, where a job was advertised on this particular platform from Cabinteely going to Dublin Airport for a wheelchair-accessible vehicle. And the price quoted to the driver was €39 via the M50. That would include the driver taking the hit on the toll as well. And it was confirmed by the mileage that was advertised on the job. The fee to the passenger on this particular job was €70. Now, what the €70 fare did was gave the passenger comfort in the fact that if they came across traffic congestion on the M50 or some sort of reason or diversion, that they would pay no more than €70. That's not a discount. That is probably the expected remuneration that the driver would get should he be doing the job privately. The driver is then paid €39. So this is where they're making their money. It's not reducing the fare to €39 to the passenger. It's reducing the fare to €39 for the driver. Okay. You know, like, just to back it up, if the genuine fare is €70 and let's say hypothetically speaking the driver pays 10% off of that, the dispatch company would make €7.
I get you, yeah. Okay, just very briefly, because I want to ask the Kerry crowd something.
Well, I can ask that question because I sit on the TAC.
Okay, yeah.
I just quick answer to say it. The people that sit, there's new members come into the TAC this in the last couple of months. There's four dispatch operators that are represented. So they have no interest in fixing the legislation at the moment. They just want to look after their own interests. We've a representative from Garda Síochána, which is brilliant. We've Tourism Ireland. We've got 2 wheelchair users. We've got 2 taxi drivers who are working taxi drivers down the country, foreign national drivers. And there's only one representative body from the taxi industry in there at the moment in the TAC.
And these are appointed by?
Well, the NTA. And, you know, the remit that I was given, listen, take notes, but, you know, we're not to have any comment and we're not to have any controversy.
Okay. Just finally for the Tralee taxis, just could you explain maybe something more out of your arising out of your statement about the effect that the app is having in rural Ireland, and what are your concerns about that?
In 30 seconds, Terry,
and maybe address are there shortages and drivers in that?
I kind of probably addressed some of it already there with the previous question there from Deputy Collins. Like some of the big problems in rural Ireland is costs, where replacement of vehicles. I have an example there where a driver sent me a costing of 2018. he purchased a Ford Tourneo that cost him €43,000 to put on the road. With the 10-year rule, that's going to have to be changed. Currently, that vehicle is going to cost him €80,000 to replace. Nearly a 70% increase in costing. So that's something.
More wear and tear on vehicles.
Okay. And also, I think we need to look at the 10-year rule. I certainly believe that should be put back to 15 years. It gives drivers.
Thank you, Terry. Deputy Shane Moynihan.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming in on both aspects of this discussion. I've met with a number of taxi drivers before Christmas. I've heard the concerns firsthand, and I want to thank them for engaging me on it. I've also met the vintners and the Restaurant Association of Ireland, so I see both issues that are being raised by both groups as well, and I do hope that over the next few weeks and months that resolution can be found on a number of the issues they're facing. I might go to the taxi drivers first, if that's all right. One of the issues that was raised with me that I'd like to learn more about is around revenue and VAT, and how tax responsibilities for drivers, that this new charging model of what the driver gets and what the meter says could be conflated by revenue. Is that something that your members have surfaced to your individual representative bodies that you're concerned about? Have you kind of vocalised that concern?
No, I can only add, if you're the only passenger or drivers that will be liable for that will be drivers who are using Uber, because Uber don't pay any income tax in the country. They run all their tax affairs through Holland, so that's why the drivers are open up to a VAT charge at the end of every journey.
Okay.
So, Dave, you want to take it from there? That's.
I don't know whether this is the question we're asking or not, but the charges at the moment usually are a commission, and if the 15%, for example, you pay VAT on the 15%, but the drivers actually don't know now at the moment if they're on a fixed fare, is that a commission?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Do they pay 15% on the fare now, or what part of it is the commission? So it does create confusion. And it also means that you have to be VAT registered, which means that a driver now has to send off a return every 2 months, which presently public taxi services are exempt. Okay, so it does create a lot more work for the driver, and there is uncertainty as to if it's a fixed fare, how much of it is the commission. So yes is the answer.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. Then on the kind of the next follow-on I have from that is, I think the other concern that's been raised with me has been around the size of the gap between what the consumer sees and what the driver receives at the end of a journey. And I want to say that I'm going at this also from the point of view of the consumer too, right? So there's ultimately our role as public representatives is to balance between obviously your livelihoods, but also what the consumer gets in terms of service, and then what businesses need in terms of the supportive infrastructure as well. Can you give me an idea of the variation there is in terms of the gap between what the consumer sees and what the driver receives in terms of percentage? Because I've heard all sorts of figures over time in terms of how big that gap can be. I thought it had been a static percentage, but what I'm hearing from taxi drivers that have engaged with me that actually it depends, and it can be kind of quite variable. What research have your representative bodies done on that in terms of getting a handle on how much variation there is in that?
There is no transparency. That's part of the problem. There is no transparency.
I'm talking about in terms of anecdotal experience of your members, though. Have you done any kind of collated research among all the members you have?
What we're saying on the examples that we sent into the committee are talking between 10–20% difference between what the driver receives and what the passenger is charged. Now, as you're well aware, it's illegal for me to charge anything over the maximum fare, but these companies are getting away with it through these additional charges that they charge you for booking through their system. So, there's huge discrepancies. Some of it depends on what time you order the taxi, how busy the apps are at the moment. So, on general, it's probably about a 20% difference between what a driver receives and what the customers charge, but it can vary depending on what time of night and how busy it is.
Thanks, David. Mr. Crotty, Mr. Cummins, could I go to you now next? I want to talk about the supply issue in rural Ireland, because this is something that obviously has been escalated to me a number of times. I mean, you have members on the ground. We know there's an issue with hackneys in town. I spent a lot of my Christmas in Mayo. I saw firsthand the issues there are in towns like Claremorris with the kind of access to a taxi or a hackney service. in terms of the barriers to entry that you talk about, and again, this isn't a swipe at the other drivers, I'm talking about how do we deal with the supply problem, because ultimately nobody wants the taxi sector to be in the crosshairs here of regulation, looking at it in terms of, we're always talking about it, you want to earn your living, restaurants want access to taxis as well, and we want fairness and accountability across the sector. What are the barriers of entry that you're hearing anecdotally from people that were in SPSVs in rural Ireland that aren't there anymore? Why did they exit, or why would people whose family would have had a legacy of doing it? Well, like, what is the anecdotal stuff that you're hearing there?
Thanks very much, Deputy. I suppose from our perspective is, how do we get more taxis operating in rural Ireland? The WAV provision is one of those things that we need to look at, because you have to have a wheelchair accessible taxi in order to get into the business in rural Ireland or anywhere in the country. There's a cost associated with that, and that could be up to 60,000 euros to get into the taxi wheelchair accessible vehicle. I think from our perspective of hospitality, we rely on taxis. We'd like to see the strategy up and running, and we'd like to have everybody on board in that strategy. The first thing that we need to start is data. The only thing that we have in qualitative data is the number of licences. We don't have data to tell us how many taxis are actually operating now in Ireland, this moment, this time.
It's a frustration expressed here.
Netherlands have it. They have every taxi has a let's call it a little black box, and it's GDPR compliant. Their authority knows exactly how many taxis are working at a specific time. We're operating here from anecdotal evidence, so we need to start at the basics. And then the other point I wanted to make, Deputy, is there's a lot of talk about price here. I think the Competition Authority has to be brought into this debate. When you're talking about price within a sector, the Competition Authority have a vested interest into looking into that. And also, is it anti-competitive or is it competitive? So I would say to the committee that there is an opportunity here to bring in the Competition Authority, the Consumer and Competition Authority, into this debate around this fixed price, and it may be beneficial to the taxi drivers by bringing them in. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Mr. Cummins. My final contribution to this, and I know I'm about to go over time, Chair, is I know that you're, for example, I remember the advisory group on SPSVs, and I know you, Mr. Cooley, are as well. That'll be one of my asks to you as a group, is to start putting that data together. Like, it's a blind spot we flagged here before, Chair, that we don't have a strong handle on understanding the data taxis. We're actually, ironically, relying on the dispatch operators to give us the information, which isn't good. My call to the representative bodies as well is you guys need to pull together data and not just anecdotal stuff. You need to have, and I would urge you to coordinate in terms of that. I think we're all coming at this from the point of view of I worked in a pub for 12 years. Some of my best friends are taxi drivers. I know how hard they work. But we ultimately want a sector that you all can rely on, the restaurants can bank on as core to the social infrastructure of rural Ireland, and the consumer benefits from too. So my clarion call to that membership group would be to get that data pulled together as soon as possible. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So next, Senator Collins, if nobody else comes into the room in terms of members, followed by myself, followed by Deputy Boyd Barrett, and followed by Deputy Healy-Rae. I know Deputy O'Gorman will be coming back, but we'll all have an opportunity, so just bear with me. Senator Collins.
Thank you, and just thank you to all of you for coming in today. I can sense both your passion and your frustration at this situation. I'm based in County Limerick, so I think we might have maybe one taxi driver in each of the towns that I know of. We definitely don't have a service like what's up here. It's like a novelty for me. When I come up to Dublin, I can get a taxi immediately. I see them whizzing by me on the street and they're on my phone. It's like being in Disneyland, because when at home in County Limerick, you won't get a taxi during the day. You won't get a taxi during the day on weekends. And there's probably one service at night, at weekends, and only at certain times. Now, go back 10, 15 years ago, we probably had 4 or 5 different services just in Newcastle West Town in West Limerick. So you knew you were definitely going to get to go out. I can see how this is affecting more than just yourselves. It's affecting the pub owners, it's affecting the restaurant owners. This is all linked, because if you can't actually get out and go somewhere and get home again, you're not going to go, you're just going to stay at home. So your drivers are losing money, the pubs are losing money, the restaurants are losing money. if you could just put it in a couple of words, why do you think over the last 10 or 15 years we've lost so many taxis in rural areas? I know the cities are probably holding their own to a certain degree, but like even in rural areas, the owners and the barmen in the pubs are taxi drivers as well, because at the end of the night, if they want to get people into their pub, they're actually offering them lifts home free of charge.
Just on that, as I said before, I sat on the Taxi Advisory Committee for 5 years, and every 2 months there was a report done by the NTA into enforcement of the taxi regulations. The majority of that report over the 5 years that I was there was into illegal activity happening in rural Ireland. Some of this illegal activity, and not making aspersions on anybody here, was being supplied by the restaurateur, by the publican. Guards from Templemore were used as fake customers to try nab these illegal operators. The taxi driver that worked in the area would be rang for the strangers in an establishment, when John at the end of the bar would bring home the regulars. So that drove a lot of taxi drivers out of the industry in rural Ireland. And that's why it's the first time I've heard about the strategy, the taxi strategy. That's what we need, to curtail the illegal activity that makes it sustainable for a couple of taxis to operate in the town.
In some way, it was probably, in some instances, it could have been that barman saying, "Come here, I'll give you a lift home."
Well, it wasn't the barman. It was somebody at the
or
end
a
of the
customer.
counter.
Okay, there was a ripple effect there. Trying to be good in one way, it took from the actual service.
And I do agree that the wheelchair entry level is probably too high for a business that you're probably only going to be busy a couple of days of work, and maybe that should be looked at, but that should be looked at by the NTA. It goes back to them being proactive in this industry. Like, they are supposed to be the governing body of this industry. And every time there's a crisis, we have to come into here, we have to ask the chairman for this and that. This should have been forewarned. I'm sure they've been lobbying the NTA for years, probably months, to say, can you relax the standards, even in rural Ireland a bit. The NTA decided to go with this local area Hackney licence, which nobody has taken up for whatever reason. So the problem is who runs the industry. They don't listen to the people that actually want us. They don't listen to the people that provide the service, and by the sounds of things, not listening to
the other side
either.
Yeah.
So the NTA, and it needs to be overhauled. You need to have more involvement from the suppliers, the users.
I'm assuming that you're lobbying the NTA constantly.
Oh, constantly.
Like, are you getting any satisfaction from?
The only reply we get from the NTA, and I could show you examples, is unsigned replies to any inquiry that's made. You don't know who is at the send out response. We've no idea. You get unsigned responses.
Okay.
We tried to do a freedom of information request to the NTA. They put every roadblock they could in our way.
To stop
about the simple, who requested that the €3 €2 pickup fee was increased to €3, because it's my suspicion and a lot of drivers' suspicion that it was the very same companies that are now offering reduced booking fees and priority fees. Because not one taxi driver that I know wanted to increase the call-out fee. But certain companies did, because they were going on about it enough. And as soon as it was implemented, they done away with it.
Well, I know myself, where I live, I would pay an arm and a leg if I thought I could get a taxi.
And this is what they hope. This is what they're hoping for.
Because when you reduce a service, you can increase the cost, because you know you're going to get it. You're going to make it back, because people are desperate, especially if. And I know, like, I'm talking about the odd time I might want to go down for a drink or something, you know, and if I have nobody around that can pick me up. But you do have vulnerable people as well that need to get to medical appointments, you know. And I have seen a little bit of that as well in rural Ireland, where we would have had full-time taxi drivers that now work for the HSE. And they're doing all those HSE runs.
Deputy, I'd be familiar with the area that you're from yourself. I suppose, as you'd be aware, in rural Ireland, a lot of the taxi drivers that would have operated would have been local.
Would have been, yeah.
And they would often have been family members and so on. I think since COVID, a lot of those have either retired or for maybe medical reasons have stepped away.
Definitely a few retirements there, yeah.
And like if you look at the industry in general, those people, they're not being replaced by local people, they're being replaced by foreign nationals who do not recognise or are not aware of what happens in a local area like Newcastle West.
Yeah.
What I would say to you is, like the local link services are working quite well in rural Ireland in daytime. We probably need to look at expanding those possibly at night time
It would, do you know what? It would actually be a really good idea to have the local link at night. I do know that there is one route, and I laugh at this. It's not funny, but I do laugh at it. There's one route in West Limerick where you can get on the local link at one point, but it never gets back to that point.
Yeah.
So it's like, what do I do? How do I get home? The following day, I think it eventually passes it. But
thank you, Deputy or Senator.
Yeah.
Senator promoted
Thank you.
Or Senator Collins. Deputy Roger O'Gorman.
Thanks very much, Chair. And just, I suppose, first of all, just thanks to all our witnesses for the very strong focus you've placed on taxis as part of our national public transport system. I think that's hugely important. And I think that question of the availability of taxis to commuters is something that's come out through all the questions, and I know a lot of our deputies and senators representing rural constituencies have flagged real questions there. I think availability is less of a challenge in Dublin, but there are times of the day and particularly times of the night when I think we recognise particularly that kind of those late hours there is real pressure there. One of the things that has been flagged with me is this kind of concept of false scarcity on the apps, and particularly times when the apps are telling you that there is no taxis available, but if you go for the premium product, all of a sudden your taxis are very available. So I'd just be interested to know maybe the experiences of one or two of the organisations in terms of that. I know, Mr. Waldron, you were speaking in your submission quite a lot of detail on the apps. Have you come across that? Has your organisation come across that at all?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Drivers would, for example, be hovering in an area, going around for a while waiting on a fare, and the app would ping, they'd respond to the call, and the customer would get in and say, God, I had to pay a priority fee to get you, And this is not anecdotal, if that's the word. This is happening regularly, that people are paying extra money for the same taxi to arrive at the door. So they pay a priority fee for a taxi that's been hovering around waiting, but the app, the algorithm decides we can charge this customer an extra charge, and that's what it does.
And is it your sense this is at certain times of the day? Is it certain areas?
No, it can happen at any time, at any place. Yeah. And just in regards to the supply, I just want to mention that there are 491 new drivers come into our industry last year, and I don't think that's necessarily the answer for rural transport, where the problem is, But it's not open the doors like other people would like to ask for, It's not open the doors to get more taxi drivers in. It's tackle the problem. So we know, and in terms of strategy, for years we've been calling for a transport forum, that taxi drivers who are part of the transport system sit down with the bus companies and the train companies, and we start talking about transporting people around the country.
And those linkages, and maybe.
Absolutely. For example, there's big plans talking about the metro in 2030. Do we provide taxis in 2030, or do we provide a taxi rank? Is there taxi ranks running the Lewis stops in the stations? Is there taxi ranks running the train stations around the country? Is there enough of them, is basically what we're asking for.
Do you mind, I just wouldn't mind coming back to this question of false scarcity. I don't know, Mr. Brennan or Mr. McGuinness, I saw you were nodding there. Just would you have any kind of take on this issue of false scarcity?
Yeah, no, as Jim said, it's done all the time. It's to create this anxiety among the passenger that, I better pay this, I better pay extra. The company gets that money, taxi driver doesn't. And as Jim says, you can only judge by, because I press the button, I accept the fare. The customer is the one who gets into the car and says, Geez, I might have been waiting 20 minutes, I've been waiting half an hour. I had to keep refreshing the app.
And you've no idea that you've now become a priority, and you're not seeing anything extra in terms of.
No.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting.
I had an incident with a well-known celebrity not too long back. I dropped him at his house, and he accused me of overcharging him.
Right, yeah.
And I said, "But look, I showed him what I was getting."
Yeah.
And I said,
that must be really frustrating for you that your members, your capital.
Yeah, like I was getting €29, exactly what was on the fare.
Yeah.
The celebrity thought I was charging them 56. So I had to actually show him what I was
He probably thought he saw him and was like, I'll make a little.
But it's happening constantly. And long term, this is the way the app companies operate. I mean, all of us are taxi drivers here. We all drive massive amounts of tourists, particularly from the United States in the tourist season. I have not met one American tourist that says, thank God Uber operate in my town or village anymore. They all talk about the regret that the local taxi service has gone because they're surcharged, they're over, and they only get taxis when the app decides they get them.
Can I just take the opportunity, I know it's not maybe the central issue that in your submissions, just the issue of safety, because when I use taxis, that's often where the conversation goes, particularly at night, and the differing perceptions that many taxi drivers have of their own safety. A lot of people saying, I don't do the late nights anymore because I just don't feel safe. It's just not worth it anymore. Just in terms of where you feel there's an issue, your ability to escalate it with the Gardaí and the like. I'd just like to kind of get your sense of that, because I suppose and again, this is anecdotal, my sense is that one of the reasons in Dublin that we're facing pressures late at night is that more and more taxi drivers are saying, I'm not going out after 11, I just don't feel safe. Now, maybe I'm wrong, again, I'd say that's anecdotal, but just your assessment about whether that's right and just maybe your wider views on the safety issues. Alan, I think you wanted to come in, did you?
Thank you very much, Minister. But if we go back to the complaint process, if you have a complaint with a taxi driver at night time and you want the next morning you wake up and your bill is, you look like, God, I must have been overcharged. The process with the NTA is non-existent anymore. To report to the NTA that I had been overcharged, or I had a disagreement with the driver, or I got thrown out of a taxi. It's non-existent, right? But first of all, like, there's no direct phone line to the Gardaí. So if you were in trouble, no matter where you were, you have to go to 999, and then you're put on a system. Whereas I think, especially in urban areas in Dublin, where at night time passengers can be hostile with drink, drugs. Everything else that's going on. A direct, Garda telephone line at night time to help the taxi drivers would be very helpful, to know they have protection.
Has that ask been made, Alan? Do you know?
Pardon?
Has that ask actually been made of the Garda?
As I said, I've sat on the taxi advisory for the last 4 years, and we have discussed it, but there's been no solution.
Okay, well,
I couldn't even get an answer on lost property.
Okay.
So if you lose your phone, which is very prevalent now, people have phones in the cars everywhere. It's down to yourself to find your iPhone on and go look for your phone yourself. It creates a problem with the taxi driver arriving at his house the next morning.
Thank you. Time is of the essence. I'm going to go straight to Senator Nesser because we've got four left to speak. 4 7's 28, and that'll bring us up to midday. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm really sorry that I had to step into the shadow there, but thank you very much for coming in. I'm absolutely delighted you're here because. And there's so many of you, that there's obviously, there wouldn't be this big group of people coming together unless it was a massive issue. And to me, it's a very clear choice. It's either we're going to support multinational corporations or we're going to actually support yourselves, And I think it's very clear. Like if we either go down the route of that and we can see, I suppose, the way things are across the world, that how our over-reliance on multinational corporations has led us in this position now with Trump and what's going on at the moment. So we can either decide we're going to set up a public service, and I'm from a rural constituency, and I know, Terry, that we'll say what you spoke of, that I know the reliance that old people, disabled people, to make hospital appointments, to make, their general livelihood, and I suppose. But I think that the NTA, it's a pity they're not here as part of this, that they can see this. Can I just ask, am I right thinking that everyone here is in support of having a public developed app that's going to be administered by the NTA?
Absolutely. You suggested it was on my first meeting when I went into the Taxi Advisory Council 3-4 years ago. I floated the idea because I knew that there was an organisation being set. I knew Ubers. I always knew the danger of Uber coming into the country, and I always knew the fact that why don't we set up our own, the NTA controlled an app, which they have for trains, they have for buses, but that idea seems to be they don't want to invest in it.
And I think it's not because it's not recognised as a public good. And I think that particularly in rural Ireland, taxis are a public service. You know.
I think down the future, definitely, it'd be a great idea.
The NTA actually piloting an app at the moment, even though they're using larger public service vehicles, as in minibuses and so on. But I think it's disappointing that they didn't choose a more rural location and pilot it. I do believe strongly that an NTA-run app would solve a lot of issues, particularly in rural Ireland. I think you could link a lot of the likes of the train services, bus services, local links, where it would drive the business as well. And I suppose from a tourist county, that would be vital too for us down in Kerry. I personally, and I think any rural taxi driver can see the effect that the multi-corporations are having with these apps. They're bringing the drivers out of rural Ireland into the bigger towns, into the bigger cities. Like Tralee, for example, we have 15 taxis that either own or rent a taxi but don't operate in the town.
It's the same as Sligo.
So,
and after a certain point in the night or a certain time during the day, not a hope of getting a taxi. You know, there's.
If I may, it's also a proper form of data collection. Like if they have their own app, then they know how many taxis are on the street and where the pinch points are. You know what I mean? So they get proper data, not data fed to them by an app company, Free Now or Uber, who have a commercial interest. They have their own data, and that's one of the positives from the government's point of view and from the public's point of view.
And I agree with you that it is luring people in to get addicted on fixed pricing, and then surge pricing will start kicking in, and dynamic pricing will start kicking in as soon as people are. Okay. Could I just ask you? I suppose I've missed some of it here, and I know you've covered a lot of this already, and I'm delighted that you're coming in to have the voice, because I think it needs to be said, and I think. But who is are the NTA open to listening? To having
Why ring them up?
But are they open to having a booking app?
No, if you were to, there's no. Look, we floated even ideas of setting. If we want professional industry, and and we want to invest in, like we proposed a apprenticeship program. Rather than doing your test online from a different country, you can do you can basically do your studying for your taxi license online. You can arrive, you can pay someone €500 to teach you how to beat the system. And when you beat the system, you become a taxi driver overnight. Here you go, out you go, drive a car, good luck, I'll see you later. We'll collect the money for your SGS, and we'll collect the money for your NCT, and we'll collect your money for your calibration for your meter, but we're not going to help you out in any way. So absolutely no investment. So we're supposed to be part of Transport for Ireland, but we're not subsidised in any way.
No. And even the grants that you spoke about around disability, can you see the impact, I suppose, Uber and Free Now have had on disability or wheelchair accessible vehicles?
Well, I can give you the answer from the Wheelchair Association of Ireland. They are totally against the concept of Uber running the country, because they are not in helping out. If you look at their apps, they're not very wheelchair accessible.
Yeah.
They are not pro that at all. They're only about making money.
100%.
Listen,
yeah.
and yeah.
It's been suggested for years that there should be an app set up for wheelchair accessible vehicles specifically, because sometimes people, although they have to pay a lot of money for the car, they don't particularly do the service that's required. So
there could be an option in it.
Absolutely, yeah.
And sorry, Terry, what were you going to say then?
One of the issues, I suppose, with the wheelchair accessibility is the grant thing is oversubscribed year after year. Like last year, it was closed out after 20 minutes. This year, it's a lottery system.
So drivers want to have this option, but there's not enough supports for it.
I suppose one of the consequences of deregulation and opening up the national licence was the arrival of rental companies who have seem to have garnered the way of getting most of these licences and then renting them out to drivers. I personally think, and I think the Tralee Taxi Association would be calling that new entrants should be given a specific route to get access for this funding. And if you're in rural Ireland, there should be a priority for that. One of the interesting things as well with the NTA is that, like with freedom of information requests over the last couple of weeks, you know, they've been asked about, you know, the recording of fixed fares on the taxi apps, algorithms, how fare compliance is monitored, whether GDPR and EU data protection issues were considered. There's absolutely no data whatsoever, or no, you know, there's nothing coming back. So, like, there's a serious gap in how they are dealing with the way technology has moved from 10 years ago to where it is today.
Yeah.
They've been left behind, and they need to catch up big time.
But it's great that there's so many of you organisations coming together. Can I just ask you, Adrian, maybe, and Pat, that you're supportive of the app as well, that's going to be an NTA public app? That
we have absolutely no issue with whatever will make the system work. And I've listened to everyone speak so far, and I want to support Mr. McGuinness here beside me, because the only one who today has talked about the need for a strategy. It's what we said from the minute we came in, Chairman, and you asked the question, Senator, that is the NTA listener? The NTA will do what the government tells them to do. If it's a state agency, will be given its writing instructions, its strategy by the government, by the oireachtas, and everyone's opinion should be taken into account in the process of that. But the one I see being entirely ignored in the course of today's hour and a half of discussion is the customer. Yeah. There's people out there today and every day who are not getting any taxi, whether they have all the apps or no app, or whether they're in urbans or rurals. In a lot of cases, there are people being left and they have the money in their hand, they're happy to pay it, and there's no service to be provided. So that's the issue, the big issue, and we need to deal with that. All the other stuff is granular that we can fix in the process, and it's not an us and them in terms of us as business operators and the taxi people as being. We're not against each other. We're trying to provide a good service for our customers, so are they. But we're working in a circumstance where the system is not working, and that's where government has to come in.
Thank you. Just my own round now before I let in Deputy Boyd Barrett, and I'm sure Deputy Healy-Rae will come back as well. I have to ask the question. We have 6 representative bodies here today. I won't name them out. Serious issues at heart here. And I can't ask everybody the question, but I'm going to ask Alan the question. Why doesn't the taxi industry speak with one voice? Why are they? And I have another organisation, because because the issues are so serious, you know what I mean? Well, and I think it's a valid question. Yeah.
Myself and Dave were discussing this while we were coffee this morning.
Why so fragmented? I have to ask the question, and I can only ask you the question, Alan.
It's such a complicated answer. Because taxi drivers are sole stakeholders, they're sole traders, they're individuals. And, you know, we only find they come to our office or the phone rings when there's a problem. Some taxi drivers don't even know there's there's unions out there to help them out. And we would help them out on tax, insurance, any issues they'd have with Gardaí, any issues they'd have with the NTA, any issues they'd have with everything and anything. But we find that, unfortunately, it's up to the individual who he wants to attach himself to. Yeah. So if it was made statutory that you have to be a part of one or all, which is not a whole lot of money to be asking to be represented.
So why doesn't the leadership of each of the different 6 or 7 organisations come together and form a single organisation, or at least an umbrella group, so that taxi drivers speak with one voice?
Well, I would say today, Jim and myself and Dave are very close when it comes to any kind of. We're basically on the same page of everything. Yeah. Like there's no conflict of interest at all.
As chair, when I, you know, I suppose,
but you know,
put together today's hearing, I was quite taken aback by how fragmented it is.
If you wanted to, because there's no investment.
Yeah.
Like, as I said before, we're not part of any.
Just quickly, if you want to come in on that, I think it's a good question.
No, it's a great question. It is a good question, and what I found over the years, when there's huge issues like this, and like the COVID shutdown, the representative bodies, in particular Jim, myself, Alan, we've all worked together, and even the Taxi Alliance of Ireland. So as soon as there's an issue that is going to affect the majority of taxi drivers, we work very, very closely. And other than that, I could ask you, I could return the question.
Look,
why is there so many political parties?
I know. That's a good answer. But no, I do think there's merit. Yeah. I think all organisations should give serious consideration to coming together under one umbrella group. I'm not going to repeat all the questions asked. I suppose to jump out for me, and I'll say something in my conclude, is the urgent need for a national strategy to address all the issues, and I actually fully support Pat as well, that the customer needs to be at the heart of that national strategy as well. And I come back to rural Ireland, where I'm from myself, and that imbalance that's there in terms of supply, and then the impact that imbalance has in terms of social inclusion, and then its impact on the tourism, the hospitality sector. But I think there's an urgent need for a national strategy with what I call coordinated policy interventions in a timely manner, because I know I suppose the individual that's waiting for the taxi, they're focused on price, but there has to be a recognition of, and I think I mentioned it in my opening remarks, the need for driver, for a business model, for that driver income sustainability. If there's no business there, we won't have taxis. It's as simple as that. And we saw the decline in taxi numbers. I just want to come back to the national taxi strategy, Jen, and just ask each group, in terms of any such strategy, what would be your number one ask in a national strategy? And I'll go around the table, Adrian and Pat first.
I think from our perspective, an overhaul of the Hackney licence to make it more affordable and easy to get people into the taxi business in rural Ireland, and that takes on board all vested interests. Thank you.
Thank you. Pat?
Very briefly, the access to being able to get into the industry. At the minute, you must get the WAV licence. It's expensive, and to buy a WAV, and if the government is serious about everyone having a WAV vehicle, then you can't have a grant scheme that opens on the 2nd of January and closes 15 minutes later.
And I think it's 25% of current licensed vehicles are which are accessible at the moment. Is that right? Anyway, your number one ask, David.
Pre-planning for the industry. Look at the industry going forward, and that's basically it. Letting the industry and the people that use our service, just let them have a bigger say in what direction.
I think it's hugely important. Of course, I mentioned the consumer, but the industry itself, taxi drivers, taxi associations should be an integral part, fully consulted in terms of any national strategy. Alan?
I really would love the NTA just to take control of the whole taxi industry in Ireland as a whole. At the moment, it's just the Wild West. There's so many different stakeholders trying to make money out of the industry, but won't invest in the industry. And that's it comes back down at the last bit for, customer experience. It's all down to customer experience. That's the nub of it all. The customers are getting frustrated. The drivers are getting frustrated. Everybody's getting frustrated, and the NTA are not taking control of the situation.
Okay, thank you, Angus.
Thank you. I think the government needs to be cognizant of the harms being suffered by taxi drivers at the moment. If I had one ask, something to immediately happen, it would be a change in legislation that caps the amount of commissions these facilitators, dispatch companies can take from a driver's pocket, because it's already been established what we need to earn and what the customer can bear. It's gone to national consultation.
Number one ask.
I obviously endorse all the things that my other colleagues have been saying, but I think the safety aspect of it, for years we've been calling with better communications and liaison officers with An Garda, and we haven't had them. There's a transport police being set up, and we haven't been consulted.
Thank you. And finally, Terry.
Yeah, I suppose, Chair, I'd certainly agree with a national strategy on transport, and particularly with the small public service vehicles. What I do think is probably needed at the moment is a complete review of the NTA and the PSV operation. If I had one ask, I suppose it would be that there would be a serious consideration given to a national app that would link in all our transport services. And I think probably taxi ranks in rural Ireland are starting to disappear. it would, I think, responsibility for those seems to fall between two stools, between the NTA and the actual local authority. So that would be something that would need to be looked at as well.
No, thank you all. I'll just maybe just add as well, just that whole area of that public service obligation as well. Waiting patiently, Deputy Boyd Barrett.
Thanks, Chair. And can I thank you, Chair, for responding to the taxi drivers and facilitating this important discussion. To thank the contributors, and I should declare my bias in that I know Dave and I know Jim and Alan Brennan for many years. Alan by reputation, not as well personally, but I'm unapologetically on the side of the drivers, who I believe are fighting in the best interests of taxi drivers, but also ultimately the best interests of the consumer in terms of the safety of passengers and to prevent profiteering by the app companies. But my first question is actually to Pat and to Adrian. You see, I do not, your concerns, your desire for national strategy is agreed by the drivers. The concern about lack of taxi drivers in rural Ireland is accepted, although I think urban settings are very different, by the way. I do not understand why you've linked up with Uber and Bolt. And I really would like to understand that, because can you honestly tell me what Uber and Bolt bring that is good to this scenario, rather than direct engagement with the people sitting in this room who are open to addressing the problems you have? Uber is a company based in California that made $9 billion in profits last year. Bolt is a company based in Estonia that I think has revenues of €2 billion. They don't work through the Irish tax system. They don't provide drivers. They don't train drivers. They don't invest. They do absolutely nothing except make profit at the expense of the driver and the consumer with technology and priority charges. So why have you aligned with them? That's my question to you. And why would you not endorse the call of the taxi drivers here for a not-for-profit app run by the NTA, which would surely be a win-win for the drivers and for the passenger? Because it would mean that the drivers get a proper livelihood, but that there is, regulation preventing the profiteering that we're getting with these priority charges. For the drivers, I'd just like you to maybe elaborate a little bit on, what we know internationally about what Uber and their likes, particularly Uber, but some of the others, what's down the road for the passenger, and what has already started to happen with surge pricing. But maybe you could talk. I mean, I've heard anecdotal examples of, Uber in other jurisdictions where you're talking about they end up taking 50%. This kind of the fare, the drivers, what the driver gets is driven down, and you get enormous surge pricing. And I've also seen examples of surge pricing already starting, where things like priority charges are €9 and €10, technology charges. I saw one for €22. And you just think, and doesn't it, and maybe you could elaborate, Dave was explaining this earlier on, that it's kind of a movable feast, the priority charge. So in other words, you could have two people waiting for a taxi. One person could be waiting longer than the other. But if one person says, well, I'll pay 20 quid in a priority thing, and the other person can only afford 5 in a priority thing, the person with more money gets the taxi, regardless how long. Now, I mean, surely we don't want that. Surely we don't want that, but maybe you could elaborate a little bit on that. And could the driver say something about ranks? Because if you get a taxi at a rank, which are being reduced all the time, but actually it's the best deal if there's lots of ranks, because the driver gets his fare, but it's a regulated fare, but you don't have these companies taking the commission out of it. So if we had more ranks, we'd have availability of taxis, but not the profiteering.
I'll start, Deputy. Thanks for the question. I'm not here to represent Uber, Bolt, or Free Now. The coalition was established nearly 2 years ago to try and look at and raise the issue around our customers finding it hard to get taxis late at night for the late night economy that pubs, restaurants are dependent on. And in terms of, you'll have an opportunity in 2 weeks, I think, that Free Now, Bolt and Uber will be here before the committee, so you can ask them their questions about their operations. Our main thrust here, or our main issue, is that our customers late at night, at some times of the year, cannot get home. And when we have done Red Sea polling of our customers, female customers want a door-to-door service. They don't particularly want to take a bus home, get off at a bus stop and having to walk 500 metres or 700 metres. So, you know, that's our customers. They've raised it with us, so that's why we're highlighting that there is a shortage of taxis at certain times of the day, certain times of the year, and in certain parts of the country there's no taxi whatsoever, and that's why we're here at the committee to raise those issues. Thanks very much.
As regarding the taxi ranks, like we've noticed over the last 20 years, a reduction, particularly on main footfall areas. One of the largest ranks in Dublin was removed off O'Connell Street, Stephen's Green. Now the College Green rank is probably the busiest rank, and that's gone probably within the next year or two. So it's making it impossible almost for customers to walk a couple of yards from bars, restaurants, shops and get a taxi. A minimum, it is going to be €4.50 cheaper to walk to a taxi stand, at a minimum. So I would encourage people to do it, particularly when they're in around the city centre and it's hard to get into, you know, closed off areas. Taxi stands, we need more taxi stands in the city, not less, whether they be smaller taxi stands, but we need more of them.
Just in the last 20 seconds, could maybe you explain why a not-for-profit NTA run app would be win-win for the driver and the consumer?
Well, it means every driver will be on it. It would have to be that every driver registered when you pay your SGS fee or whatever. So every driver, you'd have a lot more taxis on it, because despite the fact that they're supposed to be great for the taxi driver, the majority of taxi drivers do not participate in Bolt or Free Now.
Thank you.
Can I just say about...
I have to, sorry, I'm really constrained with time.
One thing about the safety issue would be unbelievable.
Deputy Healy-Rae, five minutes.
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to welcome you all here, and I suppose to get you to understand, I don't get into last because I'm not a member of the committee and them are the rules, and that's fine, and I'm glad and very appreciative that the Cathedral lets me in. My background is we've had a PSV licence in our family, my father before me since 1956 for the provision of school transport, and that's all we do. And I understand what you have to comply with, and the bars and all the regulations that you have to comply with, and have your vehicle in order and all that. And I appreciate what Jory said there very much about the 10-year rule now, and I had a number of people on to me that are cars, that taxis reached the age of, that had to replace them before the end of last year now, and they were making the case that during COVID they were very little used and everything like that, and this one particular man had his hip done and he was out of, commission for 12 months practically, and surely the case has to be made for a vehicle that's, passes all the tests and everything. And why do you have to change it just because of the age? I mean, we all know that one car could have 1 million miles run and another may not have 100,000 miles run, and sure, which is the newer car could have way more miles run. So, I mean, that has to be looked at. And I know that you have several other issues, and what I really, agree with you 100% is, if there's another type of taxi or whatever you call it, Uber or whatever it is, come in and not don't have to comply with the same rules that you have to. That's wrong. I don't know how we're going to address it, Chairman, but I can understand that there are way less taxis in places like Kilgarvan, and I have Joanne Collins there talking about Newcastle West, but it's the same everywhere. They're not to be seen at night at all, and then during the week, and the weekend then they go to maybe the bigger town and they're too busy there, and we just don't have public transport. And look, anything that I can do, send me emails or whatever personally, and I always do my best. I understand your problem and I can see the issue, and it's only how do we combine together to deal with it. And I see Adrian there, I understand his business, and that you just people don't come out, they can't come out if they can't get home, and we understand that, and I don't know how we're going to deal with it. It's a massive problem, and it's not often myself and Richard Boyd Barrett agree on an issue, but we do agree in this. Look, Cathy, look, I know you want to talk yourself. I'm with you for whatever I can do for you, and I'd only be grateful to be asked and like to be asked.
Well, that's the first time Deputy Healy-Rae has finished ahead of time, and for that, there's a lot of firsts here today. Not alone, then I'm getting worried because he's agreeing with Deputy Boyd Barrett. No, and I really appreciate that, and time is of the essence.
Yeah, and I must go as well. And
thank you, thank you.
For the last few years, we've been asking the NTA to extend age restrictions for the cars that were affected during COVID. And there's 751 cars going off the road now at the end of 2016. The 161 cars, 162 cars are not getting an extension. And the 151, 152 cars last year were in the same situation. But because it went then into the Fine Gael manifesto, they were given an extension. And I wish one of you would draw up a new manifesto and give these people an extension.
And just for my own knowledge, the 161 standard have to be replaced. Do they have to be replaced with wheelchair accessible vehicles?
No.
Okay, that's right. I just want to do this. Look,
we all know that the new cars are not as good as the older cars.
As well as
Chair, can I add to that? So the submission we made that
I can't. The time is of the essence, and I've got restrictions. There's another meeting happening in here. It's 1 minute to 12. I've got a minute to sum up. And how do you sum up? I just want to just reflecting on my own notes. I just want to thank all the witnesses today for your very frank contributions. And I know, to me, it's very clear today that we just don't have what I would call a single taxi problem, but it's a system-wide imbalance, and demands exist, and particularly outside of Dublin, and particularly at evenings and the weekend. And for me, a taxi system that doesn't work for drivers ultimately won't work for passengers, and I don't think we should lose that message, and vice versa. Regulation must serve the public interest. I think we'll reflect carefully on today's evidence. Obviously, we've got a hearing next week as well. I will be discussing with members of the committee in terms of recommendations that we will make to the Minister and to the National Transport Authority, including around what I said for me is number one, that's the national taxi strategy, how app platforms need to be regulated, how rural availability, very important for me, rural availability can be supported, and how barriers to entry can be reduced without compromising, I suppose, on safety and standards. Look, I want to thank all the witnesses today for your engagement, for your time, and we will revert at a future date. I now call the meeting adjourned. The meeting now stands adjourned until 9:30 a.m. next Wednesday, 28th of January, when the Joint Committee will be in public session. Thank you very much.